but I appreciate that very much. I'm going to introduce Jenn before we give her the floor. And Jenn Alcalde is a second-year clinical psychology PhD student at Fuller Theological Seminary. She is working towards destigmatizing mental health in the Filipino American community through research, therapy, and community partnerships. I'm going to just say a quick something before she comes up. But you know, one of the things that KP didn't get into that I know he could, because we started talking about this on the phone a couple weeks ago. But like, unless we as ministers and theologians and as believers understand some things about like St. Augustine and how Augustine's own personal struggles informed his understanding of the human person and what sin was and what he was so afraid of and what ought to be like the path towards Christ-likeness, right? It will be so difficult for us to construct some kind of a theological or pastoral response. We have to get back there. And I think the same thing goes with what we're about to hear from Jenn, because research matters so much. Trying to do ministry or trying to be a practitioner without having a solid foundation in scholarship and research and the state of the conversation over decades, or in the case of Christian theology over millennia, is such a disservice to our people, right? And for those of us who have access or the opportunity to study, there's a responsibility on us to bring that, the best of research and scholarship and study to our community, because we do know, like, Pastor Fidel shared that many communities, many pastors do not have these privileges that we have. Right? I know that in the Philippines, it's said that there are, I think, 4 pastors for every 5 churches. So that means there are multiple pastors leading multiple churches, or there are pastors leading multiple churches. And I think only 20% of them have any kind of formal theological training. Right? So what that does to our churches when these immigrant communities seek to establish faith, communities where they are also meeting spiritual and cultural needs at the same time is super important. So they're latching on to like purity culture, right? But in the same way, our inability to seek professional mental health services. So with that, let's welcome Jenn. Share with us some of the research.
Am I tall for this? I'm not sure.
Do you want the chair?
Do you want the chair? Nah, I think I'm good. I like having more agency standing.
Stand up.
Yep. All right. Magandang hapon, Amelia. Good afternoon, you all. So, as Pastor Jay mentioned, I'm Jenn. And it is an honor to get to speak with all of you. If I may say really quick too, FAMI was one of the reasons I came to Fuller. And so a lot of my journey and talking about my identity, psychology, like my faith and whatnot. And there's just been so many factors at play, but it needed something to connect all of it. And so 2 years before I came to Fuller, 2 years before I came to Fuller and found out this was happening, I just remember God saying, like, you're going to be here later, just wait. And I was like, oh, that's funny. And the reason why I mentioned this time frame, because that was the time frame I did this master's thesis. And so, I'm going to start off my presentation, as you see, from Hiya to healing, overcoming mental health disparities in the FilAm community. I'm going to say right now that I'm not going to give an answer on how to overcome it. I'm just going to mention that this is all here and it's still very much present. So as we go into the next slide, please. So as multiple folks have been providing, I will provide mine as well of my lens. And in more academic spaces, we also call it positionality. Just to frame for all of you on how I'm looking at this data, how I'm conducting research. So I am a second generation Filipino American, meaning that my parents are from San Pablo City, Laguna. And so both of my parents are Tagalog speaking. My parents immigrated from San Pablo, Laguna to California in the late 1980s, and my older sister, born in 1990, and I was born in 95. And so I thank them for taking the time to pray for me and my sister to make that time going to migrate over here, and giving me and my sister the opportunities and privileges that I'm having right now, which is to explore the things that I can hope to heal our community. So I was born in West Covina, California. As you see right here, you may know the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And so it makes a reference to that. And I remember when everyone was so excited about that show, or like, we're on the map, the Filipinos. And so we have West Covina, California, and then I'm sorry. Wow.
Started it then.
I can see it. So I was also born at, or not, born West Covina, I mentioned that. I also went to a Filipino American United Methodist Church. And so I went to a congregation that was pretty much 99% Filipino. And my pastors were all Filipino. It was very common to hear bilingual sermons, and not even just Tagalog, of Cebuano, Pampangan, Chococano, and whatnot, depending on who was there for their assignment there at that church. And I lived across Southern California. So why I even bring this up in general is that I come from a region where we have the largest Filipino American population in the United States. And so my idea of looking at like my place in society, it was very brown around me. And so my perception of that comes with, oh, I didn't actually know where I stand when I look at the larger society of like white, Black, and everything until I left it. Until I left when I went to college, and went to just different other regions in Southern California that were not as prevalent as West Covina or here in the San Gabriel Valley. So with that in mind, I'm gonna go ahead and provide some, go ahead and do that. Thank you so much. I always forget, I'm not controlling it here. I'm controlling it there. So my research that I was looking at, I'm going to just provide some overviews. So disparities in Filipino Americans, what this means, we're talking about disparities of there is an existing issue and there is not going to be, or there is a lack of seeking mental health services with that. So the first thing I would mention is that in our literature, we find that Filipino Americans seek mental health help at significantly lower rates than the general US population. So I want to also clarify here that in a lot of the literature that Asian Americans, and of course that is already problematic because of its aggregated data, Asian Americans as a whole is already seen as not going to therapy or having less help-seeking behaviors than the general US population that could be like majority Caucasian, whatever. So you have that, zero in on Asian Americans. And if you parse that out, Filipino Americans are seeking lower rates than their East Asian counterparts. So we're seeing this gap that's happening here. And actually in the second bullet point, so in 2003, there was an epidemiological study done by Gong and colleagues. They interviewed over 2,000 Filipino participants in the United States. And what they were looking at was not just therapy. I want to make this clear. It's, are they going to their general practitioner? Are they going to their minister? Are they going to another lay person? And the finding for that, to contextualize it, is that 75% of the Filipino American sample never used any type of mental health services. It's not just therapy here. So I want to make that clear that that's kind of where this like large of a gap is coming from. And to also mind you that even though there's this gap, that doesn't mean there's low levels of, or that doesn't mean that we don't need the help.
Yeah.
And that's where the third bullet point comes in. Filipino Americans experiencing health disparities and higher rates of psychiatric disorders, such as depression, suicide, and eating disorders. Some of the health disparities that are here are higher rates of diabetes, higher rates of heart disease, higher rates of hypertension. And along that, when we think of health models, physical health affects your mental health too. So where is this coming from, right? It's just like, oh, like it's just random, right? Like it's just this happens individually. There's systems in place. So what was really great about Dr. Eleanor Bailon, who joined in that lecture a couple of weeks back, is that she provided an amazing comprehensive overview of colonial mentality. I mentioned this because this is also part of the framework. I don't need to take the time to look into it because it's an invitation for you all to see that, but keep that in mind that as I show the data and whatnot, colonial mentality is really in the midst of all that is happening here. So Virgilio Enriquez, pioneer of Sigalojong Filipino psychology, provides 4 basically cultural values. For this presentation, I'm only going to be focusing on Hiya. So Hiya, I would like to say this right then and off. It's very complex. An American scholar is the one that said Hiya meant shame. An American scholar reduced it. So this is also where I want research to come in, is because we're losing the beauty and we're losing the complexity and the nuances of what this actually means. It's actually not meant to be negative the whole time.
Yeah.
So I want to say here, Hiya is synonymous to a Filipino sense of propriety, shame, or shyness, where the Filipino tries the best to represent their families honorably. So it's this idea, like, I still, again, think about myself at like the Filipino party. I was literally just at one last week where, like, I was just telling some of the folks here, I wasn't even related to the family and I just was there. But there was that feeling of like, okay, I'm here with my parents. Let me kind of not act a certain way where I'm not authentic, but it's just something in my mind. I don't want, like, I'm not going to do anything to shame them. I'll just use the word here. But it's just this thing to keep ourselves in mind, kind of keep ourselves regulated. And I'm even not sure about even using that word. But I think you all kind of get the idea. So going on to our next bullet point, Hiya implies that an individual has to consider how others feel or what others must say before the individual does in fact. And so, again, these are still not exhaustive definitions. But what I also want you all to kind of see with me, y'all, is that when it's not being done in a healthy way, then it could start looking like, oh my gosh, like, I'm feeling shameful. Or like when I hear like my parents are like, when I say something that's maybe not like what my parents are thinking, or I'm disagreeing with them, it's like, walang hiya. And so, like, again, my context, now we're already connoting that walang hiya is a negative thing. It's already kind of having that tone when actually wasn't meant to. So, and with that in mind, so again, we're seeing this hiya piece, we're seeing the shame piece. So with that last bullet point, I put an asterisk there because I'd love for us to kind of think about this towards the end for our time. So, and as you can see, this is also more recent research too. This is 2010 and 2022. So FilAm may feel that it would be less shameful to turn to religion than to seek help from a mental health professional. For that specific citation towards the end, Drs. Alviar and Dr. Del Prado, what they did was a qualitative study, meaning not really using numbers, but they're actually interviewing parishioners at a parish. And so they're interviewing, I believe it was 12 Filipinos in this congregation here in Northern California, and was saying, what's like, has your priest ever mentioned mental health? Like, do you know what do you know what to do if you're starting to feel like distress or whatnot? And some of that research shows like, yeah, like I go to my pastor because like I come here every Sunday to pray, or like there's already that confidence that they know they can go there. So like, what can we do with that if they already know they can go there? And so, and then they're like we've never been to therapy, but like we know we can like address like how we're feeling and pray about it and whatnot. So I know these are some of the themes that were mentioned earlier presentations as well, so I'm not gonna go too much into it. But this is a topic that is mentioned a lot in, like in a lot of Filipino American psychology circles. So as I mentioned, with Hiya being so complex, and part of my heart in being a researcher is to try to measure that. At this point of my professional career, I am basically using a lot of surveys that are existing. And hopefully it's just going to capture as much as I can with it. So with that in mind, so as I mentioned, so before coming to Fuller, I did my master's thesis on the impact of shame and health-seeking behaviors in Filipino Americans. I had multiple questions and hypotheses, but that was going to get too academic. And so I summed it up to say the question I was asking throughout my research thesis was, what is the relationship between shame and health-seeking behaviors in Filipino Americans? I also wanted to add, this is the definition I used for this research study. Again, it is not meant to be exhaustive. It's not meant to cover the whole complexity of our experience. We're working on it, folks. So there's still more to come. So the definition I am using, shame and Hiya, it results from, again, think about it's for like you as a person. It's the concerns about others' negative evaluations of the self. So you're entering the room, you're like, oh my gosh, like, what are they thinking? Or the perceptions that one has brought shame to your family. And so, well, again, if I was in that Filipino party and then maybe I decided to have like too much or something, and then, but I'm in this space where no one knows me and something like that, then the inhibition or something is like, oh shoot, did I make our family look bad that they're like the daughter of a drunk or something? So like, again, just thinking about the family aspect, how others perceive you, and it's all about like kind of how you're evaluating yourself. So where I got that definition, and actually, can you go to the next slide, please? So I kind of went ahead, I apologize. So I surveyed 122 Filipino Americans. How I got this survey or how I got this sample is mostly through emails. I sent it out to a lot of the communities I am part of. Fun fact, my research recruitment thingy, I actually posted it on subtle Filipino traits on Facebook, and that's actually how I got most of them. So I thank the moderators for accepting that post. So I got a lot of feedback that way. And then I left it intentionally vague because it's just going to be too much detail in terms of if you're interested in the breakdown. I'll provide one breakdown later. But like if you want the makeup and whatnot, that's what we talk about in like these psych conferences and whatnot. So they filled out a demographic survey. And so what I was looking at was their gender. I was looking at their sexual orientation. I was also looking at their immigrant generation. And that's actually going to be what I'm going to be talking about is second generation. They had to at least have one parent that moved from the Philippines to the United States. They were third generation. It's at least one grandparent that moved here. So I was looking at generations as well. So the two surveys I use, and I won't go too much into it, is the interpersonal, oh, can you go back once? Sorry. Thank you. So the interpersonal shame inventory was 10 questions. And so how it breaks down into external familial shame, it's actually just that definition I used in the previous slide. External shame being like how others perceive me, familial shame being how am I bringing like shame to like my family. So I'm just bringing it up here just for the clarity. For these other things, the inventory of attitudes towards mental health services, it's intentionally vague here because really it's for another presentation, but that is what I use to look at kind of what's nice about like survey inventories. We kind of like just put the name in it, so it's not that ambiguous. So what is it measuring? Attitudes towards mental health services. And then we can get more specific in what we call subscales. So there's like a large scale we want to measure, and then how do we like kind of break it down to be different ways. So I won't go too much into it, but I was looking at indifference to stigma, help seeking, propensity, and psychological openness. All that to say, go ahead and next slide. All that to say is, what is our overall attitude towards going to see help? And so this is my one of, I saved you all some time. It's like one of like 10 findings. And this is the one I kind of wanted to show off the most. And so what we're seeing here, so I'm gonna just gonna break down the table for you. So one of the things in research that we want to look at is what's called the means and standard deviations. So everyone's math brain's like, I thought I got rid of it. I thought I got rid of it years ago. But I'll bring it back real quick, and it's okay. We're not gonna calculate together. So means, which is like that letter M under some of those columns, it just means averages. It just means the scores of, so imagine like each of my participants, they did 10 questions, and then like they were filling out like the responses were all numbers, and then the whole like average of, you add it all together and divide it by 10. It's okay, you don't remember how I did that, but that's how you get these numbers. So I'm gonna focus on, actually, sorry, let me backtrack a little bit here. So as you see, it's by immigrant generation. So I'm looking at second generation again, for folks like me who have parents that moved here from the Philippines, and third gen. And so really my take home point here is this. When we look at these means, the higher the number, the higher levels of shame. So pay attention to the second generation. All the numbers are higher than third generation. What does that mean? It means that the second generation, because our parents are immigrating from the United States, and actually one of our folks earlier that mentioned that like dual like experience of acculturation and culturation, are trying to navigate these two identities, we're still kind of holding a lot of that shame. And then we see in third generation, it's still there, but it is lower. So imagine like I kind of think about like maybe Filipino families with the second and third generation, like second gen parents being like, okay, well, I see that like mental health is a little bit more normalized now. Let me impart this wisdom on my kids. And then like kind of the overflow of that is they're just, they're going to be more open about it. And especially with the generation after me, mental health is becoming such a more prominent conversation. So I don't want to dismiss that either. So all that to say, so yeah, that was, let's go to the next slide. So all this to say, when it comes to research, why does this matter? The weight of Hiya affects generations of Filipino families. It is still there. And again, this is not with the context that it needs to be get rid of. I want to make that clear. It is weighty because it has to do a lot with our families, and it kind of holds us together as community. It's affecting us, but we need to kind of handle it for the lack of better word, we just need to handle it more mindfully and better. And how can we hold that in our families and our communities of, making sure we're just holding each other up. I will continue that thought in a bit. Notice how I didn't always say therapy was the answer. Notice that I just didn't say, oh my gosh, okay, so everyone just needs to get a referral from me. I'm gonna it's not that. Yes, therapy is good. I'm in this field for a reason. But I also know it is not just up to us therapists and even psychologists in the room. That part of this is partnership with you all. And so as I show in my second bullet point, Filipino Americans who are suffering, they will still look to you all as ministers. They will still look to you all as pastors on your campuses or your churches to seek healing, especially if therapy is inaccessible. And as a psychologist in training, I can at least say internally, it is still inaccessible. Yeah. It sucks. And so we're trying our best too systemically. So that's why we also depend on you all. So with our third bullet point again my third bullet point being, our ministries and communities must be present for those who are suffering and ashamed. So again, as I mentioned in the beginning of of my talk that I'm not gonna provide an answer on how to do it. I think what's the beauty of our like congregations and our people is that we're not a monolith. And that you all know your context best. And at least I'll speak to myself as a psychologist in training, as someone who wants to partner with you all, or that you all as being like any ministers and whatnot. We can work together and we're available for that. Now I want to leave this last point just with a verse. Oh my gosh, was it the wrong version? Is it Galatians 6 or 5? It's okay. My bad, y'all. I'm not training here to be a pastor. So thank you. I just realized what this was. But anyway, I know. Bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law. And so with that in mind, I'm going to conclude my presentation here. My last slide is not only my contact info, but a QR code of a yes. So two things. One being that QR code leads to basically a living Google document. It's one of the things I was inspired by because I did a recent talk in a few weeks ago on kind of on this topic, but just having just a whole document I could just give to the community, because I was recognizing that I was using this analogy with someone. I had all these snacks, but I didn't know how to share it. And I'm just like, I've gone so much in my training so far, and I'm like, I want this to be accessible.
Yeah.
That's a lot of my work as a scholar, practitioner, whatever, is to make it accessible, because that's justice. And then my information, and as you can see, my email, my Instagram, and my Twitch, for if you need a virtual study buddy. I need to get work done too. But that is my time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen. Good stuff. So we have time for questions and responses to Jen's presentation. And, we'll do this specifically with Jen's material or anything that it brought to your minds. For about, 10-ish minutes. And then we're going to go directly into kind of our last section of reflection. And then I'm actually going to ask you all some questions and try to get some feedback from you regarding, things we'll do after in the future. So questions and responses to Jen's wonderful research. Yeah, Shereen.
My question is,
For sure. Also, can you speak a little bit louder, please? Sorry about that.
loud.
Thank you. Thank you.
So one of my questions relates to how your research intersects with diversity, the lack of monolith you're talking about in the Filipino American community, and faith expression. So were you able to look at your research, and you have to limit and have to delimit and do all the things?
Yeah.
Were you able to look at the generations based on Catholicism specific activity in Catholicism only? Or did it also have, were there any implications related to other denominational involvement? I know Catholicism is a huge part of the culture as well, I get that. But I was curious about that.
No, that's a great question. And thanks for being here, friend. So my master's thesis in its context was actually not religiously based at all. And so part of it was just the structure of the study and whatnot, and basically my criteria was literally like, if you identify as Filipino American, you live in the United States, and you are 18 and over, you could do my study. And so actually what you're maybe low-key foreshadowing is possibly my dissertation. So I want to kind of in fuller language integrate like that theological aspect, or just like, again, that very strong religious presence in Filipino culture. So right now, I know I cited that study, and that was mainly on Catholics. And so that was like literally in the title. And so as of right now, when I see a lot of Filipino American like religious literature, let me know if you want to add to it, Pastor Jay, is it just seems like it was just kind of set across. Like here's people who are like they have a spiritual background, they have a religious background, like Filipinos who are religious, Filipinos who are spiritual. And so I haven't seen anything so far of being like, I'm just going to be looking at Filipino American Protestants. So I haven't seen that just yet. Maybe more.
Yeah, thanks so much for your presentation. And I think too, just addressing the fact that, you know, therapy is not the silver bullet to solve all these problems. There are many places that I think we need to be able to draw from in order to do this. And I know that you said you don't have the answers, but
So give us an answer.
thoughts are of how can, you know, mental health professionals, people that are in your field, researchers, partner well with Christian ministries, with churches to, I think work together towards their communities for wellness, those things. So
Yeah.
just curious what your ideas are.
Yeah, so thing comes to mind is that I think both the ministers, pastors and psychologists, therapists, whatever, I think we both equally need to do the work. And what I mean by that is like, I don't want people to just come up to me and be like, oh, like they found my or like, oh, they found my LinkedIn, they found my psychology today. I don't want this feeling of everyone's coming to me for knowledge. I feel compelled as someone who's in the community to also go out to the churches, attend churches, go work with community centers. So I think there just needs to be both an active participation and just be in like relationship with one another. I'm actually referring, part of my insights coming from earlier this year with the Asian American Center, we have a collaborative called the Asian American Wellbeing Collaborative. And so there was a panel looking at pastors and therapists, and the therapists were congregants of the church. And so like taking advantage, let me rephrase that, because that can mean anything. But just like if the therapist in a congregation feels led to kind of use their knowledge as a way of serving in this way, like to do like partnerships like that, because I think it has a lot to do with like proximity. Like for example, like in the context and like positionality that I share, like being also part of like different Filipino organizations here in Southern California, being part of Filipino Church Network, like I've kind of gained just this network, not only through me individually, but also my parents. And so the proximity is there to be like, oh, like I remember my dad was like, oh, Anak, do you want to like, Anak meaning child, do you want to like speak at this church or something like that? And like, because now there's that visibility, there's that proximity to me. I don't know if that really like answers your question, but I think it just has to do with like, I think we also just kind of have to come to each other as people also, and not just be like services to be transactional.
Yeah.
I think that's also really important too, because it's like, I think you just get better quality ministry and serving if it's out of relationship. Because yeah, I mean, I know our services, we like get paid, not right now, but in the future. So that's a whole different thing. I don't think psychologists in the room. But hopefully that can add some start to the conversation. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you don't have to pull up the graph, but when you were presenting some of your findings, the highest variable that contributed to shame in terms of the need was external shame. And so that was across both, and I think it was over 150 for both. I think one was like 2 and then 1 and 3 something. That said, how do you define external shame?
Yeah, so in this case, I'll be honest, I'm using the definitions made by the creators of the survey.
Okay.
And so external shame was essentially like, there's a negative like look about yourself, and in that negative evaluation, or how others people like perceive you. So that's the external, it's outside of you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they weren't looking at how like specific institutions, more so like your perception of how other people perceive.
Right,
Got
in
it.
general,
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting.
I have a,
Yeah,
I have a answer to that.
yeah, that's it.
Because in my culture, or
Yeah.
my generation, don't ask what generation. In the Philippines, people don't go to therapies or
Right.
psychologists. Number one, there are not much of them.
There's not.
Because when a student wants to go to medical school, they will not go to psychology or whatever.
Or psychiatry or something
Yeah,
like that.
they will go general medicine. Because when they graduate, they go to the US. So that's number one.
Yeah,
Number two, they know that they will not have any client.
Yeah.
Because in the Philippines, during my generation, again, don't ask. When you go to a psychologist or therapist, anything about the brain, and people know that you went there,
Yeah.
they consider you cuckoo. You go to mental hospital now.
Yeah.
There's a negative connotation.
yeah,
So that's the explanation why most Filipino Americans.
yeah,
Oh, Filipinos do not go to therapy.
yeah. No, thank you for sharing that too, because one of the things I'm interested about, like being like a psychologist in training, and I realized, so I visited my parents' church a couple weeks ago. And again, it's a Filipino church, and they're wondering like the work I'm doing. And then so like they actually thought, they're like, oh, are you just working like with them? And then they go to the hospital. And so part of like my teaching with them was like, oh, are y'all stressed out at work? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, you could go to therapy for that too. Or like, are you like, were you just stressed out about like finances or something? So the idea is that like, if there's stress, it doesn't have to be so bad that it has to lead to like hospitals.
Yeah.
Like if they're struggling in like marriages, if they're struggling with stress and anxiety, like especially with the pandemic. And so I worked for a community mental health clinic in the height of 2020. And we saw an over 200% increase in calls because they were in distress, or that meant they were so anxious and they just didn't know what to do. The world was very overwhelming. But it was sad because they waited until it got that bad. But then part of my teaching, hopefully in the future, is like if there's something that could be addressed, like I'm actually working with clients right now, and some of the things I hear, I'm like, oh my gosh, friends vent to me about this all the time. And I'm like, you're saying it in the therapy room, that's welcome. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Tying your research to the purity culture regarding shame.
Yeah,
The reason why, again, in my generation.
sure, yeah.
People are very, very conscious about if you have a daughter, make sure that the daughter do not get pregnant out of wedlock. Because if she does, she brings shame to the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, there's so much there too. It's a lot.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, I just wanna thank you for your presentation. And also you mentioned that, pastors and ministers are in the front lines of a mental health crisis. And that is so true. I love how you also highlighted the importance of pastors and mental health practitioners partnering
Yeah.
and bringing wholeness and well-being to our community. And with that, so I also want to name that we can't force everyone to go to therapy,
Yeah.
even if we try.
Yeah.
And also and there's a lot of barriers to including economic barriers. It's
Yeah.
not, like, to be honest, it's not that accessible, even if we try it to be accessible. So I guess my question is, what would be an alternative? I guess like asking from a church standpoint, you see a person under your care, they need psychiatric help.
Yeah.
And all I can offer is the basics of pastoral counseling. How do I make my community a therapeutic community, and kind of like not pressure this person to seek therapy when I know they cannot afford therapy.
Right. Exactly. The very, very quick answer was just talk to Tim. That was a very, very quick answer, but, I've seen a couple of practical ways. I've seen congregations that, like, I know they've had like community funds. And so like, maybe that could be something saying like, hey, like inquiring with your church. I've seen, so I think you mentioned that too, Tim, just like if there's like a pool of funds to kind of help with like maybe like the first or second session or something like that. I've seen like, I know this is still being built out in like so many different ways, but like mental health ministries too. So like, cause also part of the work for a psychologist too is like, so the fancy word that like some like psychologists use is called psychoeducation. And so what that means is that we're going on the community and just sharing kind of just the overarching like knowledge to know about mental health. And like, that's available for us. Like, I forgot, didn't have this whole disclaimer, like, this is not therapy, but it's just, this is education, like, so I think where I was trying to get with that is that like, that is accessible knowledge for a psychologist without like having to do any like paying and whatnot. This might not fully answer your question, I apologize too, but I guess just a word, like a note is that there's something in therapy called a sliding scale. And what that essentially means is that therapists or psychologists have a specific rate and it is high. I don't know how to, there's no way to sugarcoat that, it is high. But a lot of times they're gonna offer a consultation in the first 15 to 20 minutes, or actually that's like a separate phone call. And you could say like, hey, like your fee is really high. I saw that you offer a sliding scale. And it's the idea that you could slide down to the amount that works for you, that works for both parties. And so it's an option for people who have, who have like financial hardship. And so like, for example, like I'm seeing clients right now, and then I have a specific rate. And if they can't meet that, I already can slide down to a lower rate. And so there's conversations and there's some flexibility, but of course there's a lot of systemic things that need to be done. So. Yeah.
Let's thank Jen. So I'm going to move us into like a closing conversation with a few prompts, and you can return to discussion with the people you were conversing with earlier. So it's kind of some two-part questions. The first actually is relating to where this is all going, right? So what would you say that you're able to take away? Okay, from anything you heard today, we had Andrew's presentation, love letter to Filipino food. We had Pastor Matt Amargo's reflections on pastoring Filipino Americans through the pandemic. And we had Denise share Mother Maritas Speaks and kind of whole developing provocative theology of chismes and chismosas. And Tim shared a question or a statement, I'm not sure, but who ministers to the ministers, which was maybe intentionally left without a punctuation mark at the end. That's I'm just reading it that way. And then we had KP talk about the purity cult and a lot of a parable at the end there, a virtual Disney case study with characters that shall not be named. And then we had Jenn's wonderful research about help seeking. So we heard a lot today. What are you able to take away? What are you taking away as we leave? That's the first. And the second is a two-part. Okay, so it's what do you, it's part one. What do you need in order to flourish and be who God is calling you to be in community? What do you need? Because we want to hear that. This initiative, FAMI, is here to resource. And the second, what does your or our community need? And I want to separate those out because I don't want one to be swallowed up in the other. I think that they're both really important. So question one, what are you taking away as we leave? And then question 2A, what do you need? Question 2B, what do your/our communities need? And that could be anything related to resources, research. We definitely need a lot of money, research funding. Because I know that Alicia Del Prado and Stephanie Alviero's research is like 11 or 12 people. That's a really small sample. We have 4.5 million Filipinos in the United States. 90% of them identify as Christian. And that's the leading study on religious help seeking, and it's 11 or 12 people. Think about that. So again, we need research money. But yeah, so I'll break into your groups, whoever you are comfortable with, and then we will come together in 20 minutes. You'll listen as we share briefly, and then we'll be done. Okay? Let's make it 15 minutes. 15 minutes, we'll reconvene, and then we'll be done by 4:30 as planned. All right? We gotta get out of this World Series game.
I know, here's the first.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm